Recently, I participated in a small game jam at my university, and my team won. For most of us, this was our first time participating in a competition anything like this, and it was my first time getting a game from an idea in my head all the way to a working TM product. It was a blast, and a little addictive. It's kind of reawakened my childhood dreams of being a game dev I had since I started watching Extra Credits all those years ago, and I want to see how far I can go with this. But while working on our game did give me a huge boost in motivation, it also taught me something. I have no idea what I'm doing. We made our game in Unity, and for most of the time I felt completely overwhelmed by all the options and settings and gizmos that it was jam-packed with. Plus, I barely did any programming on the game. I was in charge of sound effects, sprites, animation, and music, so I only did enough coding to integrate my work with the rest of the team's work. I didn't do any of the work coding the mechanics, or the player movement, or changing levels, or the menus. With the rest of the team going their separate ways, I need to learn how to do that sort of thing on my own. Since I was a little intimidated by Unity's depth when I worked with it before, and I had some pet peeves about how Unity worked as a tool, and given Unity's other issues, I thought it would be worth having a look at other options for game engines. From what I can tell, there are 3 main game engines out there that you can use for free: Unity, Unreal, and Godot. I've already tangled with Unity. Unreal was another option, but it seems very heavily focused on making 3D games, which I don't really feel like jumping into just yet. That left Godot. It's free, and it's open source, which is a huge plus in my book, but it's also a lot younger than Unity, which means that it's unlikely to have the same back catalogue of tutorials available. But I thought it was at least worth a shot. I wanted to start out by just wrapping my head around the new system, so I thought I would try and begin by creating something I have a full blueprint for. I decided to port my Game Jam game, once more with Spirit, into Godot. Here's how that went. I am by no means an expert in either Godot or Unity. I promise I'm going to be overlooking some major parts of both engines. They are both incredibly versatile tools that I kind of doubt any single person uses in their entirety. There are so many buttons and menus and settings and methods and hotkeys that it's pretty much impossible for any casual user to wrap their heads around the entire thing. Which is fine. They're professional level tools that are built robustly enough that you can make real, actual, sell-for-money games with them. But this does mean that there's a learning curve. That is to say, I won't be comparing all of Unity to all of Godot. I'm going to be comparing the parts of Unity that I use to make my game to the parts of Godot that I use to make my game, with my background of noodling around in Unity from time to time over the past few years. To start off with, I found Godot far nicer to work with than Unity. Since the program weighs in at a mere 130 megabytes, Unity several gigabytes, it was a lot more responsive and less demanding on my hardware. When I accidentally left Unity running in the background on my laptop, it ended up chewing up a bunch of resources that tanked the battery life. That just doesn't happen with Godot. The whole scene node structure thing is very intuitive to me. I know that Unity has a similar system with its prefabs, but Godot makes scenes much more central to its workflow. In Godot, the first thing that you make is a new scene, and then you add nodes to it to control its shape and its functions. They are made such that you can effortlessly drag and drop these into other scenes, saving tons of time and effort. If you find out that a node you've been building would be useful in multiple places, you can turn it into a scene in just 2 clicks. It makes it way easier to structure your project correctly, and so that's something I found myself doing far more than I did when I was working with Unity. Now I have every object that I will reuse neatly in its own scene that I can add into a level with the click of a button in the editor or with 2 lines of code in a script. I also really like how nice coding in Godot feels. It uses its own new language called GDScript, but apparently supports using C# and C++ code, which means I could have loaded the C# scripts that I have from the Game Jam into the Godot version. But since they have so much Unity-specific stuff that I would have to rewrite them a bunch anyway, I decided to take the opportunity to learn GDScript as I rewrote the code from scratch. The fact that Godot has a built-in IDE, instead of leaning on a different program like Unity does with VS Code, makes it feel more complete. Although it did take some getting used to. I found myself alt-tabbing to look at the code out of muscle memory, only to end up looking at Spotify. In Godot, you use Control F3 to switch to the script view. I used the function keys for controlling volume and brightness fairly regularly, so it was a bit annoying to have to turn the function lock on and off, but since you can customize the hotkeys to be whatever you want, it isn't a big problem, just something I needed to get used to. GDScript is a much more beginner-friendly language than C#. It takes a lot of its design philosophy from Python, another popular for beginners language, but it gives you a little more control if you're experienced and have a dislike for the training wheels that weakly typed languages give you. You don't have to worry about forgetting a semicolon or not closing a bracket. All of the different blocks of code are distinguished with indenting, which makes it very easy to see when you're writing something in the wrong place. It does make it a little annoying to find errors when the problem isn't the indenting though. I spent a few very frustrating minutes trying to figure out why my code wasn't compiling, even though the indenting was right, before I noticed I'd accidentally deleted the colon at the top of the method. It might just be because I had a clear blueprint to work from this time, but it was a lot easier for me to make my game in Godot than it was to build it in Unity. I was able to do it all on my own in about 3 days. Even the quality of life features that took me a while to add after the game jam was over, like the ability to speed up the ghost and the progress bar showing when it would become a block, was super quick and easy because there were so many features built into Godot that I could plug into my project and just have them work. One minor downside I've had with Godot has to do with its tutorials. First off, I want to make it clear that I'm not meaning this as a criticism to the people who made them. The issue comes from the fact that Godot has recently had a massive update from Godot 3 to Godot 4. From what I can tell, this has been a complete upgrade in terms of the engine itself, but because they changed the way a bunch of things worked, and some of the names of the nodes, older tutorials were a little harder to follow since I had to translate what they were doing into the new version. Those are the big things that I noticed while working with Godot, but here's a little nitpicking lightning round for the other stuff I took notes on. I made an annoying bug when I was trying to make a second type of switch. I spent ages trying to figure out why it wasn't working, when it was using exactly the same script as a switch that was working elsewhere in the level. It turned out I was using a different signal for each of them. The not working one was using body entered and the working one was using body shape entered. All of Unity's time functions default to seconds for their units. On the other hand, Godot's time functions are either in milliseconds or microseconds, except for delta, which is the variable that represents the time between frames, because that's in seconds, which was really confusing to me as a beginner. Okay, lightning round over. So what's my conclusion? Am I going to stick with Unity, the industry standard tool in a major company, or will I move to Godot, the open source passion project? I think it should be pretty obvious by now, but I'm going with Godot. It might be a decision I regret later on, especially if I decide to port my games to a console someday, but for now I think it's my best choice. I'm still very new to game development. I've actually only made one game, even if I did make it twice. Given how much I learned from Godot using this little experiment, I know that I'll want to have way more knowledge about how to use all of the tools it offers before I try and make a proper sell-for-money game with it. So, it's time for some project-based learning. I'm going to be learning the major parts of game development that I want to have a good handle on by building games focused around each one. I'm going to be doing about 10 mini personal game jams, each one based around the type of feature that I want to know how to build by the end. And I'll be talking about everything I learn about the Godot engine, programming, and game design in general over this process right here on this channel. I've got a list of themes and ideas for them, and I want to keep most of them a surprise for now, but the next game that I'm planning to make is going to be focused on juice. You know, game feel, particle effects, screen shaking, cool little animation flourishes, that sort of thing. And I'm planning to make it a bit of a Geometry Wars clone, since I think that game has some really good juice to it. I'm not exactly sure how much time and work this is all going to take, but I am planning to have at least 3 other videos out in this series by the end of the year. I'm planning to give myself about 4 days to make each game. I'm not sure how long the videos are going to take to make, but I'd like to have them out about 2 to 3 days after the game is finished, so that I can have each chapter of this little project done in about a week. No promises about how often the videos are going to be coming out though. But that's all I have to say for now, so until next time, take care everyone.